is my hobby, the greatest hobby. Hello everyone, Hobbyist here, and we are back at it again with our Talisman character guide. Now, recently we have just finished our Sacred Pool expansion character guide, and now we are going to be moving on to the 4 Fireland characters and going over their individual abilities. So let's go ahead and get into that first character. So as you can see here, the first character that we're going to be covering is a character that is very much different than anybody else in the entirety of Talisman, but especially inside of the Firelands expansion itself. So let's go ahead and get into a Nomad. Generally, when it comes to characters, they have their own individual starting locations, and I generally like to position them in my videos where they're generally stationed. But why is it that I have the Nomad off of the board? Well, let me go ahead and show you her character card to show you why. So the Nomad has a Strength 3 and a Craft of 3. It's pretty balanced. And then as you can see here, in this bottom right, we've got a new logo. See that little fire symbol down there? Meaning that any cards or any characters that encompass that logo are all a part of the Firelands expansion, and it makes it easier for you when it comes to separating this expansion from any of the other expansions that we've covered in the past. So that's just something to keep in mind. But moving forward, she's got the Fate of 3 and an average life of 4. She's a neutral character, but as you can see, that starting space is any space in the outer region. Now, if you remember from our outer region talk all the way back in the beginning, we were talking about the base camp. Anywhere on the outer strip that you can see that leads off camera towards the village, it goes towards the back, all the way to the chapel to the right, and then all the way to the right where there's the city space, which is off camera. That is where the Nomad can start, and it makes sense for her character when it comes to characterization, because the Nomad's really just a traveler. She just wanders around, she is able to take advantage of the various locations and being able to provide a better position for yourself in regards to what happens inside of the Firelands, as well as just in a game of Talisman in general. She is the only character in the entirety of Talisman whose starting position is region-based, and not so much as a specific space. So that is definitely something that is interesting about her. And on her character card, it shows here that she has 3 character abilities. Now, like I've mentioned in previous videos, generally when it comes to character builds, the fewer abilities they have, the higher the quality is going to be. So let's go ahead and go into that first character ability. So when you encounter space not in the inner region, you may ignore all the printed text on that space. Instead, treat it as if it said, draw 1 card. Do not draw a card if there is already one in the space. So how powerful is that ability? Well, inside of the actual Firelands itself, that becomes really important when it comes to the terrain cards, because if you remember from a Firelands video, which I'll leave linked here up top, we had mentioned how the terrain cards are going to change the spaces, and how certain space changes might be for the better or might be for the worst. So for example, we have the crags that's up towards the top right of the outer region. If that goes away, maybe you wanted to gain a stat boost or something, or it got turned into a ruins space and you don't want to be necessarily drawing 2 cards, you just want to draw the 1 card. Well, you can ignore the text that's on the terrain card in order to take advantage of the various areas. So you can basically override terrain cards as far as what they tell you to do. And this becomes especially important in all the expansions that have terrain cards. So the Firelands expansion with its terrain cards, the Harbinger expansion with its terrain cards, and then the Cataclysm with its terrain cards, all of which can be overridden through that first ability, the Nomad. So that is a very strong start when it comes to abilities. So now, let's go ahead and look at this second character ability. When you encounter a place card, you may choose to ignore it. If you remember from our base game Talisman tutorial, I mentioned that there are at least 6 different classifications of adventure cards. Places are one of them. Now, more so specifically inside of the Firelands, when it comes to their specific places, there's going to be a lot of places that, and I'm not going to spoil it because I want you guys to be able to discover these cards for yourself, but just to give you an idea, there are cards inside of the Firelands deck where places are either going to burn or might spawn burn tokens around certain spaces or certain parts of the outer or the middle region. And this could also happen with outside in any of the 4 corners as well, where the card might be event specific to where places will start to show up. And being able to ignore those places that might harm you is definitely very useful. And being able to ignore any places that might teleport you or throw you off course from whatever you were trying to do is definitely very useful. So now, getting into this last character ability, says, instead of moving normally, you may spend 1 fate to stay in your current space and encounter it. You cannot use this ability if you've used it during your last turn. So, essentially, this third ability, when it comes to spending fate and staying in spaces, this becomes very useful if there's a huge amount of Firelands tokens surrounding you. So if you were just playing with the base board in front of you and there was a bunch of Firelands tokens everywhere, generally you're gonna more frequently run into areas that are already burning, so you'll just essentially be running around to burn to death with any other character. But with the Nomad, even though she's only got 3 fate, being able to use that fate and stay in spaces, thinking small picture, with cards like the Pool of Life, which allows you to even stay and get more than 1 life to heal yourself up, or the Magic Stream, which allows you to gain strength, or the Fountain of Wisdom, which allows you to gain craft, and all the various places that offer stat boosts, being able to spend fate in order to stay there and to gain those stats, to replenish yourself, to maybe give yourself a second chance to roll something better to avoid Firelands tokens, or the various places that have been changed over the course of the Firelands expansion that might be areas that are less advantageous when it comes to whatever you're playing with. So being able to spend that fate and stay might also give you the opportunity to find the Ifrit cloak, which inside the Firelands expansion is the only item in the entirety of the 81 adventure cards that can protect you from Firelands tokens. So even though it's a low chance, it gives yourself an opportunity to be able to keep digging for those objects, to be able to stay and interact with the places or the things that you've already pulled up into the game in order to give yourself that boost. Because the Nomad, with her being a balanced character, much like other characters that we've covered in the past, there's no clear direction on whether strength is the way to go or if craft is the way to go. So being able to kind of play a little bit even, kind of using the terrain to your advantage is what Nomad really specializes in. So, and also being careful about the last sentence where you want to strategize in your mind where and when you want to use that fate to stay, because you can't be using up all your fate to stay in one location. So that is definitely something to take into consideration. But overall, when it comes to, I want to say, the Firelands characters, all of them are very good in their specific areas, and the Nomad is especially very good at taking advantage of the terrain. And I haven't found a lot of weaknesses when it comes to her playstyle. So, all of the Firelands characters, if any of them come up, they're honestly going to be more situational and more, what expansions are you playing with? What are your end conditions, and what requirements do you need to complete in order to meet those conditions? So, overall, I think the Nomad is definitely a solid character. And I want to thank you guys for having watched this video. And I'll see you guys in the next one.